Hi, I'm Nicola Graham and welcome to Chewing Over High Performance. This episode explores strategy and investments with Joshua Catlett, a business advisor, broker and investor. But first, thanks to our sponsor, Nucal. Nucal is a comprehensive practice management system for allied health practices and clinics, ranging from large to small and multi-location. Nucal is designed to deliver both clinical and management perspectives, so practitioners, practice managers, and business owners can achieve their desired outcomes. Nucal understands the importance of performance and therefore looks to deliver these results for you. Nucal would like to offer the first 100 listeners an exclusive 25% discount on their data conversion migration for 2024. Just visit nucal.com/promotions/MSK24 to start a free trial with the coupon code MSK24 and you'll receive 25% off your first data conversion and migration. Welcome to Chewing Over High Performance, and in this episode I'm joined by Joshua Catlett, an experienced entrepreneur, business broker, advisor and investor. Joshua graduated as a physiotherapist and worked in MSK and occupational health roles prior to buying and consolidating several physio practices, which later gained investment and developed into the high street brand that we now know as Bodyset. Joshua has undertaken postgraduate study with the University of Oxford, and he also went on to found Verilo in 2021 following his exit from Bodyset. So Verilo advises business owners on valuation and exit strategy and brokers practice sales in the health, medical and wellness sector. Joshua also invests in a range of businesses from life sciences to professional services and most recently in the femtech sector. Joshua and I have spoken quite extensively over the years, and thoughts around strategy come up quite often in our conversations. And so we wanted to explore this topic in more depth. And so Joshua, how do you know what strategy to follow?
Thank you, Nicola. Nice introduction. Quite a broad question. I've had a bit of a think about this, and when I'm looking at what strategy to follow, I guess it depends on the situation, but I try and triangulate information from various different areas. So I think it's important to first of all identify what problem it is you're trying to solve or need you're trying to service. And then the first thing I'll do is look at what is going on in the sector that I'm operating in. What's being done well, what's not being done so well, and more importantly, I'll look at what is available, what solutions there are in other sectors that I can then bring to this sector. An example I quite often use for this is, and not always the most obvious one or appreciated one in the physio sector, but when I was acquiring lots of clinics many years back in the physio sector, age debt was always a huge problem, and I suspect still probably is. It always sort of struck me as why can't we use an Uber style payment system and implement it? So again, that was just a classic example of looking at what people are doing in other sectors and how you can apply it to your own. The other way that I guess I know what strategy to follow is by surrounding myself with the right people. So I think it's really important to get a diverse mix of opinions. That's not to say that you go with all of those opinions and you just go with the flow. I think it's important to stick to your guns. But I think you need a variety of opinions and sort of ideas to, I guess, sort of come up with the right strategy to follow. And then the final one that, again, I think quite often gets missed out, but making sure you're sense checking that strategy against long-term trends. It's very easy to look at what do we need to do now to achieve our sort of short-term goals, but is it sustainable? Is it future-proof? They're the three areas that I look at in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting from a kind of just a system point of view of like the system that you follow from that strategy, I think the interesting thing around the trends, or well, not I'm not going to call them trends at this point really, but what's changing more on a macroeconomic kind of more global scale that we need to be aware of, but how you triangulate that information from the point of view of not getting, because you can still have a strategy, can't you? You can still have a plan and be set by it, but but you have to have that degree of kind of flexibility to it as well, because otherwise you can be going off in one direction and the rest of the market is going off completely in the other direction. So when you talk about those the ability to kind of sense check it and that, where have you found your networks from? Where do you find those people? Or are they mentors? Who have they been over the years that have provided that degree of, I suppose, criticality to your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, quite a diverse range of places. I mean, I'm fortunate that I've got family members that have been that are entrepreneurs in their own right, varying from sort of one-man bands to owners of very large sort of mega organizations. So I think family is a source. I've almost always had, or up until the last few years, a mentor that I've worked with quite closely. Not so much in terms of they're sort of feeding me information, but more as a way of sense checking what it is that you're doing. And yeah, it just it stops you running in one direction without, I guess, of having someone going, wait a minute, have you thought about taking it in a different direction, or great idea, but it may not work because of X, Y, and Z. So I think having somebody that's going to sit down with you, be honest, and yeah, sense check what you do is important. It could be employees. It doesn't have to be, a non-executive director or a chairman of your board. It could be a new graduate employee that actually has got a new innovative idea. So
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think instilling that mindset within kind of your organizational culture, to put it as a term, really, that everyone can question everyone is a really good thing and a really healthy thing, because it allows for the innovation of ideas and that discussion. You mentioned kind of friends and family there. So was I hate that term, kind of entrepreneurship in your blood, but did you always think I'm going to own a business at one day? Was that kind of always on your radar or within your strategy at a relatively early career point?
I think I've always gone with the flow, but I've never been particularly good at conforming. I think that's always the issue. Um, so yeah, I mean, I say got entrepreneurs in the family. I mean, my dad owned a printing business. We're not talking a huge business, but he always worked for himself, worked hard, and I sort of saw the rewards that he got from doing that and the flexibility that he had. Um, uh, my mum has always sort of done quite a broad range of things, from uh, uh, being involved in she's done gardening to antique restoration, and later, probably shouldn't say this with a evidence based physio audience, but later went into homeopathy. But I guess that's quite good because it gives you a view of sort of other opinions and
Yeah,
I guess sort of a more holistic view of healthcare. But yeah, I think neither of them have had classic sort of 9 to 5 jobs or careers. So that clearly sort of shaped me in some way.
yeah. And I think we're seeing more and more kind of conversations around like a rise in what's termed like portfolio careers, where you have kind of different aspects going on. Pulling back to kind of that aspect, what's the issue with conforming? What is it that, because I can relate to that quite happily as well. You tell me
Yeah,
no, and I'll do the
conforming.
opposite.
I think it just depends on your personality. I mean, there are many people out there that want and thrive with the structure of a 9 to 5 and clear instructions. I'm just not one of them, and I think it's down to an individual thing, really. I've always found that I can do 6 months, maybe a year on a particular project, and then I need something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
very
is Yeah, and I think that is where you talked about kind of flexibility in careers and things. That is what the element of entrepreneurship. It has highs, it has massive lows as well, but you have that degree of, I suppose, autonomy and control over what that looks like kind of going forward. You changing track just very slightly. Obviously, you've been involved in the MSK industry for many years now. You've seen it from different sides, from the point of view of being the physio, being the business owner, being kind of the investor, the exit, so that kind of full circle loop. What are the trends or conversations or things that are happening currently? I hate to still use the term kind of COVID, but things must have changed quite significantly from the business you built and grew pre-COVID to then kind of situations afterwards. What are you noticing as the kind of current conversations and things that you're noticing in conversations?
Sure. I mean, there are the obvious ones, sort of telehealth, digital trends, but I think they're probably quite obvious now. Some of the more unique ones, I'm seeing a real rise in specialisms or specialist skills. So rather than sort of general MSK, I'm seeing a lot more. I'm seeing more businesses move to a model where they're delivering women's health again is still fairly broad. I've seen things narrow down further than that, but specialist skill sets, so pediatrics, women's health, injection therapy, you name it, and not just in the physio sector, but in the health sector more broadly. The other one, which again, it's I guess more looking at the businesses within the MSK sector, but I'm seeing a real move to having much stronger and clearer brand identities.
Mm,
Rather than just, we're a physio, I'm now seeing people that are honing into what kind of physio, or I suppose perhaps catching up with businesses in other sectors and focusing on what niche they're going to solve. So I think that's quite an interesting one. And I guess along the same lines of digital health, I think there was a big spike in that post-COVID, but I'm now seeing a move to more mixed delivery models,
yeah,
and not just so much whether it's online or in person, but perhaps the more use of a multidisciplinary team, and perhaps varying appointment lengths. So I think gone are the days where it's half an hour once a week. I think they're if you're training for an ultra marathon, you need a different level of support than somebody that is, I don't know, got an acute knee pain from gardening. So I think
yeah.
there's more. There's a more varied sort of range of delivery models out there, and again along fairly similar lines, much more personalisation. So I think it's personalising the rehab recovery treatment program to the individual more. So they're the things that I'm seeing cropping up time and time again in the physio sector, but across medicine, health, and wellness more broadly.
Yeah, I completely relate. And I was sitting on I did my MBA at Warwick Business School and they do alumni events. And last night there was one on the future of consulting and specialism, relationships rather than transactional,
Mhm.
personalized. Those were all aspects that were coming up from what's happening in kind of consultancy market. So I think there is, so if we relate it back to kind of healthcare, the maturing of the private healthcare market in the UK has got to be driving some of these aspects. Because people are struggling to access the level or the degree of service that they want under public health systems or to how they traditionally did, it's driving a more, I see it as it's driving a more kind of consumer marketplace for private healthcare. So it's not, I go to my doctor and my doctor tells me this. There's much more of a development of that, of those more ingrained and I suppose longer term now relationships within private healthcare, so that because people know that they're going to be accessing that for now forever, as in they don't see it going back into a different way, that a service that they used to maybe get under the NHS. I was talking to someone the other day about podiatry. They're like, I'm just never going to be able to access that again, and so I now need a podiatrist for the rest of my life, kind of thing. So people are creating those kind of relationships within there. I think it's really exciting to see these bigger voices and these bigger brands and marketing, and people, I suppose, yeah, finding their voice of what they, in the very strategic sense, why do they exist? What are they giving the market? So rather than traditionally just being, I'm a physio service, well, what
Definitely.
what type of physio service are you? Who do you work for? Like, I think it's quite exciting to see that maturity of the profession coming through. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, even sort of taking it down to, if you are looking at the example of a physiotherapist, it's what type of physio you are. I mean, there's always been sort of a hands-off, hands-on debate, but I think it's sort of gone beyond that now. And I think individual personalities are or I guess styles of practice are shining through. But I think more than just people jumping on a particular fad, maybe doing Pilates or acupuncture. I think it's actually, I guess, uh, yeah, looking at their style, how they deliver it, and how that's going to resonate with a particular client group. Uh,
Mm,
but again, that I
yeah.
guess ties into personalization, how you deliver it, and your brand identity and your specialism. It's sort of all four of those areas.
Yeah. And even like I noticed from our business, like you still get a certain degree of people that are like, I don't mind who I see, but more and more people are like, I want to, who's your shoulder person or who's your knee person or things like that. And I suppose if I look at that, sometimes that's like, oh, but everyone can see they all of our MS. So part of me wants to say that, but part of me then throws it the other way and puts my feet in their shoes, I suppose, and say, oh, okay, so you are actually putting your hand in your pocket and you want to invest in your health. Of course you want to see the best person, wouldn't I? Like, so that whole, that I think there's a real shift in thinking about it from the point of view of, and people won't like this term, but as a customer, as a consumer of healthcare, what do they want? And that's taking on their stakeholder voice in a patient-centered care way, I suppose.
If you've ever had any sort of serious health issues or things that need consultant input, it's sort of the done thing. I mean, I had a hernia operation not long ago. I spent days, if not weeks, researching the different operations and the professionals that could do it and what was going to get me the best outcome. Why shouldn't patients be doing that in the physio sector?
Mm,
I'm sure, I'm sure I could have seen 100 consultants and they would have all done an equally good job. But I was, well, I wasn't putting my hand in my pocket. It was my private health insurance company, but I still pay a premium for that.
mm.
I wanted to make sure that I was getting good, the best possible outcome. So
So
um, they
if
should.
we ask a little bit more of a, I suppose, a slightly controversial question, is and we'll bring it back to physio just because majority of the audience may be well, let's do, I suppose, musculoskeletal kind of physio, osteo, chiro as well. Are we ready for that shift in customer behavior? Are we ready for those questions and that visibility that we're going to have, and we do have now in the market for people to choose?
Are you ready? Hmm.
You come
I
across
think some are.
businesses every day. What do you think?
Uh, yeah, so I'm seeing a number of innovative brands pop up that I think are ready and are embracing that challenge. I also have conversations with a huge number of people in the industry that aren't ready. They're doing it a certain way, and I think they will continue doing it that way. And then there's a group in the middle that I think want to do it a different way, but it's quite a steep learning curve to deliver. I suppose sort of change their practice, change the model of delivery, and again, it's not something you can do easily overnight. So I think there are different camps. Yes,
Mm,
there are some people that are embracing it, and I think they will be the businesses that we see thrive over the next few years. Yeah, I suppose for context, a lot of the people that I speak to are approaching an exit, not necessarily
mm,
ring, but perhaps looking to pass their business on rather than innovate, change, and deliver in a new way. So
yeah, true.
the audience that I see is perhaps uh, slightly less innovative than some of the some of the younger up and coming brands.
Yeah. And I suppose we can both relate to the fact that we bought businesses. And so I'm going to the point that you alluded to, that change takes time. It's not something that kind of happens overnight. And you've got a historic kind of culture and mindset that sometimes you have to work with, not battle against. And that just does take some time. So we both bought businesses. How did you find that? Did you go, when you bought your business, did you go into it with a mindset that I want to change this, or was there a different strategy at that point?
No, I think I went in pretty early on with a view that I wanted to change it. I mean, I've always, I think what physios do and the physio profession as a whole is, fantastic, but it's I suppose the way that services are being delivered, or the way that it's come across to clients, has maybe been a little behind other industries. So my view was always, if I can buy up a number of businesses that fundamentally deliver great care, have got good staff, but perhaps their practices are a little outdated, or maybe not their clinical practices. My classic one was going in, changing the brand, updating the website. So fairly simple things.
Mm,
It's much more commonplace nowadays. But when I started, when I took on my first practice, almost every business that I took on had paper notes. I was lucky if there was a website. Online booking was a absolute dark art, and I understand why. And it took me years to get it right. But I think there's a lot more. Um, uh, we have access to a lot more sort of technology that other
yeah.
industries just have taken for granted, and it's just a normal part of their processes nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it is catching up, but it still feels like it's harder than it should do to make a seamless customer journey. So when you then bought those businesses, there's a degree of capital kind of needed for that, related to how that grow. When did you realize it was the right time to kind of raise investment, or to look to external finance or partners within that journey?
I think that's quite an interesting point, and I've sort of reflected on that over the years. And I guess I was flattered in the early days that someone was
Naively or not?
naively, yes,
Yeah.
naively. I was naively flattered in the early days that someone was willing to, um, you know, throw money at me. And again, I guess it was perhaps a bit of imposter syndrome. I didn't kind of, think that, I had anything particularly special. But in hindsight, I'd say don't take investment or don't look to raise it unless you need it and you have a very, very clear plan of how you're going to use that to grow your business.
Or
Um,
pay it back.
and pay it back. But there is nothing. I mean, I've gone through several investment rounds, at varying levels over the years. But I can tell you there is nothing better than the fear and anxiety of running out of money and not being able to pay bills as a motivator to spend it wisely. So,
Yeah.
and as I said, if I had a message for young me, it's sort of, don't just take on money and because it's there, it's sat in a bank account, and you're then trying to figure out how to spend it and how to grow, and you don't necessarily make the best decisions. So, yeah, it does depend on what stage of growth you're at, but I'd say think carefully before taking on investment. Make sure you've got a very clear plan on how you're going to spend it, and make sure that plan adds value. So,
Mm.
kind of look at what you've got today, what taking on that money would do for the business, and also think about how you want to raise those funds. Young me was very happy to take an equity investment because I thought, well, I haven't really got to pay that back until I sell the business. So, it was quite a sort of seemingly low stress environment at the time because you had a bank account full of money and no one was, you didn't have a bank coming to you saying, I want that back. Now I wouldn't give anyway equity away. I
Mm.
would well, not as a sort of primary mechanism. I would always look at raising debt. Perhaps that's a little less attractive with the current interest rates, but yeah, I think seriously consider why you're looking to raise it and how you're looking to raise and how much you need. Don't take more than you need at the time.
But unpick that slightly psychologically. The reason we would have been happy when we were younger, and I'm going to use the general kind of we, to give away equity is because you then don't have 100% like that. It goes back to that flattery thing, doesn't it? Of like, I don't know what they're investing in. And so I'm happy to share the pie. Where with experience, with knowledge, with whatever you're building now, you would have much more kind of confidence in what you're doing, and therefore you can see the value of it, and therefore don't want to share that unless you really have to. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And all of the investors that invested in me, I mean, I think I was 22 at the time. They didn't really scrutinize the numbers. They didn't really sort of look over a detailed business plan. And many of them said to me, look, we're investing in you. So they obviously saw more in me than I
Saw in
saw
yourself at
myself.
that point. Yeah, yeah.
Whereas now it's a different kettle of fish. As I said, I would, I'd certainly take on bank debt to if I had a purpose for it, but I wouldn't easily give away equity again, unless I think more so if I had a value add partner, but not
Mm.
just for the sake of taking on the money.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I was, that was my question I was going to ask really is, do you think they invested in the business or do you think they invested in you, which you've kind of answered. But I suppose the leading question onto that is, what do you think investors look for when they're investing? I think we originally talked about maybe that being around what are they looking to invest in a business, but I think actually we need to broaden that out, that actually what do you now look for as an investor, and what do you think other investors are looking for when they are happy to part with their cash?
So I think it depends what it is I'm investing in. So if I was looking to take on a majority stake in a company, it's a very different set of criteria, and
Mm-hmm.
that's more about the business return on investment and the risk versus the reward. Good example is sort of more angel investing, which I can't say I do to a great extent, but I've invested in a couple of early stage startups, including, as you mentioned at the beginning, a femtech company. And sometimes the valuations for those are pretty ludicrous. They're pretty
Yeah.
punchy, to be fair. But to me,
Based on no revenue as well.
exactly based on no revenue. But what I look for in those is the founders. So number one thing for me is the person that I'm investing in. Do I think they are capable of pulling off whatever plan they've got? I think the market opportunity and in particular the long term growth. So
Mm.
again, with this fintech opportunity, I know nothing about how they run their business, what they do on a sort of on a short term basis. But I think actually it's a growing sector, and that's why I invested. Um, I always like to hear a good story. So what led the founders to that point, why they think that there is a need for their product or service, and how they're going to solve a problem. So storytelling is critical. I think it's important to have a realistic and logical plan. The amount of times that someone says they're going to go from zero revenue to 5 million in a year, and you kind of go, well, that's ambitious, and never say never, but it's pretty unlikely. I'd much rather someone gave me a realistic plan, that I can buy into and is believable. So I think that's another one. The other one that might not be obvious, but tax incentives. So I
Yeah.
am much more inclined to pay, a silly valuation for a company if there's a tax advantage. So the femtech company that I invested in recently was SEIS approved. I don't know the exact number, but ultimately, for every £10,000 I invest through SEIS, I think the exposure is about 2.5 or
Yeah.
2,400
Yeah. Yeah. It
there
is.
or thereabouts. And if I've got this correct, I don't think you pay capital gains tax on the gain.
Yeah.
So effectively, you're getting, as I said, your sort of risk is less than 25% of what you invest,
Yeah.
and you get 50% of that immediately back against your
In your
income.
next tax.
So
Yeah.
it,
It's
so
a
yeah,
no. I've done two of those in the last
yeah.
year, and it's a no. Like, it's a no-brainer to some degree. Why I wouldn't,
You,
because
you
I've
can
got a
take a bit of
tax
a
bill to pay anyway.
Exactly. You can take a bit of a punt. And my view is if I can support young entrepreneurial founders, as people have shown me support in the past, and my view is if I invest in 10 of those, five of them might fail, three of them might tick over. Hopefully, two of them will be unicorns and make a great return.
Yeah.
But it's also fun again surrounding yourself by different industries, different people. I learn a lot from that as well. Um,
Yeah.
and while it might sound odd, the last thing on the thing I look for, although an important thing, but the last of those points is what's my return on investment likely to be, and the exit strategy. Um, Again, that the sort of order of those and the importance of those changes the more of a stake I'm taking. But if you're talking angel investment, and relatively small amounts of capital, then yeah, it's founder, market opportunity, people, what's the plan, so forth.
I think that leads like kind of perfectly on to my last question, really, of if you take the years of experience, the highs, the lows, the knowledge you've gained, and all of that over your career to date, if you could sum it, which is going to be hard, into kind of three, let's say, main learnings that you could either tell yourself back in the day or you can share with others as they start to, I suppose, diversify or think of their careers in different ways than solely the clinical, what would they be?
I can tell you four
Oh,
because
okay.
I've thought
You
about
get a bonus.
I think probably one of my most important ones is just never get too comfortable. And I think you can go through different stages in your life. I mean, I'm relatively comfortable at the moment because I'm focusing on sort of family and things, but now getting itchy feet and looking to sort of scale again. But I think it's important to always challenge yourself and never just stay still and tick over. So yeah, don't get too comfortable. Um, it's more commonplace now, but my second one is embrace your failures. I think it's really important to fail, learn, and don't be ashamed of failures. I think they are an important part of the journey. Um, a big one that I have learnt, probably COVID actually had a big part to play in this, but don't chase the golden egg. I think it's important to diversify. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have a vision, stick to it, and see it through to the end, but don't sort of keep going, keep chasing the same thing. I think, yeah, it's important to have interests in different sectors, and so forth. And probably one of the most important and one of the things that I've sort of reflected on the most over the years is not to take your team for granted. As I said, I like to think I've always sort of looked after most of my team members, but there's always that point where you sort of think I should have tried harder. I should have nurtured them. I should have not imposed a restrictive covenant, so harshly. There's yeah, the team that you take on help you to succeed. So Yeah, don't take it for granted.
They're really good points. And if I could sign, like, so some, I think the failure one is really interesting. When I did one of my MBA modules, it was in San Francisco on entrepreneurial finance, and the mindset difference for VC funds in America is they would only invest in basically an entrepreneur who has already failed. They wanted to see failure because they want to see that you're resilient enough to go again, which I think very much differs from the European kind of culture where I agree. I think it's changing, but failure is still seen not really talked about, or a weakness kind of thing, where I think that is quite different. We're quite different in that cultural perspective. So I'm going to take those kind of summaries from you as: be happy being uncomfortable,
Yeah,
don't worry about failing, know when to cut your losses, and be an empathetic, nice person.
I think that summarizes it nicely.
Josh, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that is the end of the 5th episode of Chewing Over High Performance. It's really insightful for me to listen to an entrepreneur such as Josh discuss the journey he's been on, the experience and learnings he now has around strategy and investments. There's never just one right path, and I think it's the accumulation of all our experiences that gives us that knowledge for going forward. I think the last question that we discussed and the points that I wanted to pull out around empathy, about embracing failure, not getting too comfortable, and knowing when to cut your losses are really key. Thank you again to our show sponsor Nucor, and I look forward to bringing you next month's episode of Chewing Over High Performance.